All right, guys, today's video, I wanted to talk about training for the spine, the 4 different domains we want to focus on when talking about that, and some example exercises on how to train those domains. I do have our list here, somewhat in order of importance. Now, that is a little bit subjective depending on the person, but in my experience, this is close to the correct order that we want to train in. So, first on our list, we have rotation, which is our body's ability to twist. The reason that's number 1 on our list is most human movements, or almost all of them, revolve around rotation to a certain degree. Things as simple as walking, or things complex like throwing a ball, swinging a bat, or making defenders miss. Really, a lot of athletic movements come from that ability to rotate. Next on our list, I have bending. The reason I have bending as number 2 is as a trainer trying to help people with back pain. In my experience, once we develop that ability to bend side to side, oftentimes the triggers for that back pain are a lot duller or they completely go away. Number 3 on our list, I have extension. And really the only reason flexion and extension aren't swapped is the majority of us as we get older tend to lose that ability to extend or bend backwards. And a lot of that is due to modern technology. A lot of us are looking at cell phones or we're sitting in chairs for long periods of time, and we just tend to get locked into more and more of a flex state. And that's why I have it as number 3 on our list, is we want to try and combat that so that we can keep a neutral posture for a lot longer. Wrapping up our list, I have flexion or folding forward. Now again, I just said that a lot of us get locked into that flexion position, but even though we tend to be in that forward flex position, we still lack the ability to really compress that spine and go further forward. Now, although this list is somewhat in order of importance, it does not mean that I want to forego flexion training and only train rotation. I always want to train all 4 of these domains, but I do want to try and prioritize having this list as kind of my ideal. Now, as far as example exercises, for rotation, there's not as many examples as you would think. But if we're starting very basic, if spinal training is something new to you, just standing with my feet planted and twisting side to side, whether that's at a more rapid pace, trying to go for a little bit of an overswing, or if we're going at a slower pace and I'm trying to get my body to rotate as far as I can each direction, doing sets of this movement that last a minute or 2 minutes or longer have a really big return on investment, especially if we start doing things like that on a more regular basis. If moving your spine intentionally like that is something new to you, even just doing that example I just showed on a consistent basis will definitely help open up that spine's ability to move. Now, if standing feels pretty decent and we're not too bad at it, we can start to add some resistance to that. So that could be something as simple as holding some weights out and having those weights swing us side to side, which forces us to have to bear down a little bit harder. Or there's a bunch of different core exercises like a wood chop where we're grabbing a band or a cable and we're trying to twist as far as we can side to side. That's a great exercise, as well as something simple like a Russian twist can be something that we can use to work some rotation. Although, in my opinion, once you get pretty good with rotating, you want to try and add it to the movements that you're already training in some sort of strength routine. So that could mean if I have a trap bar for deadlifts, or if I just have one weight, doing a deadlift where I'm rotating as I lower that weight down to the floor helps incorporate your spine's ability to twist while doing a movement that you'll likely have to twist when you're doing it anyway. Things like yard work, we have to rotate all the time in that flex position, and we don't really think about it because we're not in the context of a gym space. So once you open your mind up to doing more rotation with the workouts that you're already doing, you can think pressing or pulling exercises. I can easily add in some upper body rotation to get a little bit more out of that exercise. Number 2 on our list, I have bending. Bending can be interpreted a lot of different ways, but when I say it, I'm really talking about bending laterally or bending side to side. One of the easiest, simplest movements that we can train for this is the side bend, where we're holding just a weight on one side. We let that weight pull us into a really big stretch on our side, and then we use all of those muscles to pull ourselves back up to that starting position. It's a really low entry point. If you're new to side bends, you can start with 5 or 10 pounds and trust that you're not going to hurt yourself. But as I get stronger with this, I can start to load some pretty significant weight into these side bends and really work on strengthening these lateral parts of my body. Because like I was saying earlier, a lot of times if you deal with chronic back pain that tends to feel muscular, if we can strengthen our side-to-side balance, then when we're training movements that typically trigger that back pain, once you have a little bit more trust in that back, not having to be completely perfect whenever we perform those movements, I often find that a lot of people have much less symptoms of that back pain. Another zero equipment movement that we can do, which is a little bit tougher, is a side plank dip. That's where you're on an elbow or a hand plank. You lower your hips towards the floor and then use your abdominals to squeeze your hips back up off the ground. Now, if you don't have a ton of upper body strength, that can be a little bit of a tougher variation. But again, like I said, side bends are really an excellent movement already. And if you have a variety of dumbbells to work with, I'm sure you'll find a weight that feels right for you. Now, extension can be a little bit tougher to work on. When I'm talking about extension, again, I'm talking about going backwards, which again, if I'm really new to spinal training, I can just train this from the standing position like I just showed. I can keep my hands close to my body as a reference point and then just work on leaning back as far as I can go, come back to that center position. And just like the rotation I talked about earlier, if I just do sets that last a minute or two, and I'm not really worried about the rep count as much as trying to get consistent at leaning back into that back position, that's an excellent way to start incorporating some of that extension. Now, once we get used to that a little bit more, we can start adding some more resistance with the pullover and the wall-assisted bridge. The pullover is an exercise where our back is on a bench, we have weights in our hands, and we let those weights pull us back, as you can see, into that big extension position, and then we pull the weight back over our body. That's a good way that we can start working in some long arm and spinal extension, which can be tougher. And another one, which is a little bit more natural, I would say, is the wall-supported bridge. Now, I hope to not mess up all of my markers here on the wall, but what I can start to do is put my hands on the wall to start to support myself into this back bend position, much like in the gymnast that can do back bridges, where our hands and feet are on the floor. Obviously, as we get older, that can be a lot tougher to accomplish. So if I just add in some wall support, sometimes that can help fix that problem and help me work that position a little bit more. Moving on to our last, but not least important, is flexion. So if you've trained with me before, you've likely done Jefferson curls before. That's where you're holding some weights on the front of your body, and all we do is let those weights pull us down and encourage our spine to try and flex as much as possible, trying to expose that stretch through our entire spine as best as we can, and then nice and controlled, bringing that position right back up to the nice upright, tall posture. Jefferson curls are a great exercise, especially if you're dealing with back pain. If you can dial in the appropriate amount of weight for a Jefferson curl, it can really help decompress the spine and help limit those triggers from your brain trying to tell you that this is a dangerous exercise. Again, if the weight is not too heavy, you can really start to have a conversation with your nervous system, which is trying to protect you, and start to work through that movement and not have as much fear about bending forward. Now, for those of us not in pain, the Jefferson curl is definitely a movement that we want to try and strengthen over time. So in the beginning, just like any strength training routine, I want to be modest with my weight selection. But as I get stronger with those Jeffersons, I can absolutely load those up as I see fit, just like I would a deadlift or a bench press or any other traditional strength training exercise. Another easy way that we can train some flexion is just a good old traditional crunch performed on the floor, back on the ground, and we're just working on trying to crunch our abdominals, and that's doing the same thing as flexing our spine. So although it's an old school exercise, it's totally a great way of working some more flexion in. It is a little bit limited as far as its range of motion, but there's some crazy variations out there using GHDs and other equipment to help you work bigger and bigger ranges of motion. The last one up there, if you've done yoga before, is a familiar one. Child's pose. If you're not familiar with child's pose, just give it a quick Google. It's a very famous, very popular yoga pose. But that is another way that we can work into some of that flexion where we're really trying to compress that spine as much as we can and work on our body's ability to still breathe, even though we're compressing and trying to get pretty much as much air out of our torso as we can so that we can continue to compress, but working on that nervous system response of not trying to freak out and tighten up and restrict it, but rather trying to let you flex further and further. Now, if this is all new to you, this can be a little bit overwhelming. What I want to do as far as a jumping off point, if you wanted to start training your spine, is we have 4 different domains here, and we have 7 days in a week. So we can split this up. I can train some type of rotation on a Monday. The next day when I come into the gym, I can train some type of lateral bending. Wednesday, let's say, is my off day. Thursday, I'll come back in, work some extension with my workout. On my Friday, we can flex with some Jeffersons. And then the next week, I'll come back, follow that same routine. Let's say I follow that for 2 or 3 weeks. I start to get a little bit more confident with these movements. I can start to double them up. So I can work rotation and extension in the same workout, then work bending and flexion in the same workout, and then possibly be hitting these exercises 2 or more times per week, obviously progressing slowly over time. But this is something we can get into the mindset of something that we should be training every day. As I've learned more about training the spine, this is my new understanding of core training. When we talk about core training, it might not only be things like crunches that are kind of obviously core exercises, but actually opening it up to a bit much more broad understanding of what core tension means, even something as simple as adding rotation to a movement and understanding that that is how I want to train my core, and less so with some of those traditional exercises that are old school and kind of played out, let's say. If you have any questions on any of this, feel free to drop a comment below, shoot me a message or a DM, and I hope to hear from you soon.